In the early morning of June 6, 2023, at about 2:50 a.m., several explosions occurred at the Kakhovka hydroelectric power plant in Kherson Oblast, Ukraine. This caused the dam to break, resulting in massive flooding in the surrounding area. Ukraine has accused Russian forces of blowing up Kakhovka Dam, located in a part of southern Ukraine that Russia controls. Russian officials countered that the dam was damaged by Ukrainian military strikes in the contested area.
So, if this was intentional, it was not a military tactic, it was an act of terrorism. The question is, who did it? Well, let's see. The Kakhovka Dam was effectively Russian. It was built by the Russian government, and it currently sits in Russian-controlled territory. The dam's reservoir supplies water to Crimea, which has been, for the last 240 years, home of the Russian Black Sea Fleet. Blowing up the dam may be bad for Ukraine, but it hurts Russia more. And for precisely that reason, the Ukrainian government has considered destroying it. In December, the Washington Post quoted a Ukrainian general saying his men had fired American-made rockets at the dam's floodgate as a test strike. So really, once the facts start coming in, it becomes much less of a mystery what might have happened to the dam. Any fair person would conclude that the Ukrainians probably blew it up, just as you would assume they blew up Nord Stream, the Russian natural gas pipeline, last fall.
Tucker Carlson said on his Twitter show. Oh? Some of you may be wondering. Did Ukraine blow up the Nord Stream pipeline? Here is an article from the Washington Post of that day. U.S. had intelligence of detailed Ukrainian plan to attack Nord Stream pipeline. The CIA learned last June, via a European spy agency, that a 6-person team of Ukrainian Special Operations Forces intended to sabotage the Russia to Germany natural gas project. Details about the plan, which have not been previously reported, were collected by a European intelligence service and shared with the CIA in June 2022. They provide some of the most specific evidence to date linking the government of Ukraine to the eventual attack in the Baltic Sea, which US and Western officials have called a brazen and dangerous act of sabotage on Europe's energy infrastructure. The intelligence report was based on information obtained from an individual in Ukraine. The source's information could not immediately be corroborated, but the CIA shared the report with Germany and other European countries last June. According to multiple officials familiar with the matter, who spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss sensitive intelligence operations and diplomatic discussions. The highly specific details, which include numbers of operatives and methods of attack, show that for nearly a year, Western allies have had a basis to suspect Kyiv in the sabotage. That assessment has only strengthened in recent months, as German law enforcement investigators uncovered evidence about the bombing that bears striking similarities to what the European service said Ukraine was planning. Ukrainian officials, who have previously denied the country was involved in the Nord Stream attack, did not respond to requests for comment. The White House declined to comment on a detailed set of questions about the European report and the alleged Ukrainian military plot, including whether U.S. officials tried to stop the mission from proceeding. The CIA also declined to comment. It was in light of this report that Tucker Carlson mentioned the Nord Stream pipeline explosion. He told us that the dam was also planned based on a Washington Post report, last December 29. And Tucker is not alone in that view.
Well, I guess it's a darn good thing that Russia decided to blow up its own hydroelectric dam to stop their own advancement. Brilliant tactical strategy on the part of the Russians to impede their advancement. The Western media is really hoping that you will buy this and believe all of this propaganda, and they are doubling down on the propaganda this afternoon. It's almost sad if it wasn't, laughable if it wasn't sad. And our redacted correspondent, Dan Cohen, is tracking all of this propaganda for us, Dan. So they're really doubling down on this.
Yeah, exactly. They're really firm on their position that Russia did it, even though the White House has said officially that it doesn't even know. So none of the White House's statement hasn't stopped the most fervent pro-war voices from automatically blaming Russia without presenting a shred of evidence. Here's NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg on Twitter saying, "This is an outrageous act which demonstrates once again the brutality of Russia's war in Ukraine." Then Spanish Prime Minister and possible future replacement for Stoltenberg, Pedro Sanchez, also implies Russia was responsible. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen promises to hold Russia accountable. Clayton, I find it interesting how they don't explicitly blame Russia, but they all strongly imply Russia did it. Like, that was the memo that was circulated to them, said imply, don't say it explicitly.
Right, because then the follow-up question will be, well, where is the evidence? Like the questions asked of John Kirby in the White House press briefing room, like, well, where is the evidence of this? Well, we're working through it, so that's why we are implying it, but we don't have the evidence yet. We're just implying all of this.
Exactly, but that didn't stop the Estonian foreign minister from directly blaming Russia. He said it straight up that Russia is responsible. And then here in the U.S., we have the California Congressman Ted Lieu. He blamed Russia too. He apparently knows something that even the White House, the Biden administration, and the Pentagon don't even know. We have former CIA Director David Petraeus, renowned for his honesty and integrity. He says Russia did it.
This presumably was done by the Russians. There are public accounts that U.S. intelligence has indications that it was Russians. President Zelensky, of course, very publicly denied any involvement, and I cannot imagine that he would do that if there was Ukrainian involvement.
Yeah, I mean, because Zelensky would never say anything that isn't true. I mean, we literally have a laundry list of things now. The attack in Poland that was blamed on the Russians, but immediately was, turned out to be Ukraine. We have the attack on the Kremlin. We would never use America. We were not attacking the Kremlin. How dare you? And then turns out, yeah, that's the case. We would never blow up that pipeline. We would never do something like that. Turns out, yeah, you did. So I love that Petraeus is giving us a moral analysis of Zelensky. It's amazing.
Yes, it's Zelensky's scout honor, with that kind of green T-shirt. I think that's the symbol, something like
right.
that. So we have Petraeus saying it. We have, there are so many sound bites from the mainstream media that I kind of just went for a select few. I like this one from Michael Kaufman, who went on PBS NewsHour, which we showed here on Redacted. PBS NewsHour collaborates with CIA favorite Bellingcat, the notorious disinformation outlet. Now, Kaufman, their expert, is a fellow at the federally funded Center for Naval Analysis. This guy is paid by the U.S. government. So of course they don't say that in his bio. They don't give any disclaimer in his interview. So I like what he says. He says, even if Ukraine did it, it's Russia's fault.
Either way, Russia is responsible, either by virtue of action or by virtue of the fact that it controlled the dam. At the end of the day, the outcome of the situation is the result of Russian actions in Ukraine, one way or another.
So let me get this right. I'm going to start using that as a scapegoating tactic when I do something wrong in my life. I'm just going to blame the other person. It doesn't really matter regardless of the fact, because it's Russia's fault. It's their fault, even though Ukraine blew up the dam. It's amazing. They control the dam. They built the dam. Russia built the dam. They control the dam. Their own forces have defensive positions all up along the river, which are now flooded and potentially destroyed. 42,000 people are being evacuated, have to leave their homes, but Russia did it.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't have to make sense. You just go with it. I guess that's the memo that he got.
Yeah.
Then we have Zelensky advisor Andriy Yermak. He actually thanked journalists for going along with the narrative that Russia did it. It's pretty amazing. He put this out on Telegram. I mean, didn't we just learn a few days ago from the New York Times that journalists are telling Ukrainian Nazis to cover up their symbols? And now we have Yermak saying, great job. Congratulations to these journalists for doing our bidding.
Yeah, this is amazing to me. This is amazing because it also, who are they thanking? I mean, remember that it's state-run media. Zelensky has removed journalists from the country and consolidated power so that now, of course, the media in the country is state-run.
The New York Times article spoken of here was published on June 5. Is the media, which has been saying that there are no such things as neo-Nazis in Ukraine, indeed no longer able to say that they do not exist? This is also being blamed on Russia. Nazi symbols on Ukraine's front lines highlight thorny issues of history. Troops' use of patches bearing Nazi emblems risks fueling Russian propaganda, and spreading imagery that the West has spent a half-century trying to eliminate. Since Russia began its invasion of Ukraine last year, the Ukrainian government and NATO allies have posted, then quietly deleted, 3 seemingly innocuous photographs from their social media feeds. A soldier standing in a group, another resting in a trench, and an emergency worker posing in front of a truck. In each photograph, Ukrainians in uniform wore patches featuring symbols that were made notorious by Nazi Germany, and have since become part of the iconography of far-right hate groups. The photographs, and their deletions, highlight the Ukrainian military's complicated relationship with Nazi imagery, a relationship forged under both Soviet and German occupation during World War II. That relationship has become especially delicate because President Vladimir Putin of Russia has falsely declared Ukraine to be a Nazi state, a claim he has used to justify his illegal invasion. The article goes on to say that, in the end, the neo-Nazis in Ukraine are a pretext for President Putin's invasion. The article changes the language and repeats itself at length. It is, as Tucker Carlson puts it, a tautology. On May 21, 2023, the day after Wagner's Prigozhin declared the fall of Bakhmut, the following article appeared on the U.S. news site Zero Hedge. Ukraine admits murdering quite a few Russian civilians who back Putin and his invasion. The article is about Kirill Budanov, Ukraine's Director General of Military Intelligence. The radical statements of Russia's Prigozhin and Ukraine's Budanov are often taken up as topics of discussion for the Western media. Here is the article. A senior Ukrainian official has admitted that his country has assassinated quite a few Russian civilians who support Putin and his war to assert control of the Donbas region. In interviews first reported by the Times of London, Major General Kirill Budanov, who heads Ukraine's military intelligence service, also promised more attacks are to come. "We've already successfully targeted quite a few people," said Budanov. He didn't name any of the victims, but said there have been well-publicized cases everyone knows about, thanks to the media coverage. Since the February 2022 invasion of Ukraine, several prominent Russian supporters of the invasion, and many innocent bystanders, have been killed or wounded in the campaign. One of the most prominent such attacks happened last August, when a car bomb killed journalist Daria Dugina, in a possible attempt to kill her father, the political scientist-philosopher Alexander Dugin. Like her father, Daria was a vocal supporter of Putin and his invasion. Both she and her father were sanctioned by the United States after the war began. Given her profile, it's possible Ukraine may have intentionally murdered her in a sinister 2-for-1 act of punishment. Most recently, novelist Sakhar Prilepin was wounded in a May 6 car bombing. And Russian military blogger Vladimir Tatarsky was killed at an April public appearance, after a woman presented him a statuette with a bomb concealed inside it. 15 others were injured. For perspective, a hypothetical parallel for this campaign would be Iraq's intelligence service blowing up Iraq invasion cheerleaders like Bill Kristol, Jeffrey Goldberg, Ann Coulter, and Max Boot, in 2003. Ukraine's targeting of civilians doesn't merely violate vague, international norms that Washington pretends to hold dear. They are explicitly war crimes. What's more, if one accepts the definition of terrorism as the intentional use of violence against civilians in order to obtain political aims, Budanov has implicated Ukraine as a state sponsor of terror. One that's received $37 billion in U.S. military aid since the war started, and perhaps double that in other assistance. Budanov isn't merely an unapologetic terrorist, he's a boastful one. "These cases have happened and will continue," he said. "Such people will receive a well-deserved punishment, and the appropriate punishment can only be liquidation, and I will implement it." In a separate interview with the Ukrainian YouTube channel, Budanov implied that any country could be witness to his killing of civilians who say or write the wrong things. Outright scum will eventually be punished in any country in the world. Only elimination can be a well-deserved punishment for such actions. In addition to his brazen confession, which was almost universally ignored by Western media, Budanov told the YouTube host that the Russian army's potential for advancing is completely depleted, but it still has a significant defensive potential, with Ukraine's long-awaited and much-hyped counteroffensive still in the wings. Budanov said, "Russia has erected a multi-tier defense system. Still, this isn't the same Russian army that could have been expected to conduct substantial offensive operations." Ambitiously and perhaps delusionally envisioning an eviction of Russia's army from all captured Ukrainian territory, Budanov said his country should seek a 60-mile demilitarized zone inside Russia. "This should be our goal. If they are not going to attack and don't decide they want revenge in a couple of years, this shouldn't be an issue." Repeated terrorist attacks on Russian territory have been carried out with a clear goal in mind for Budanov. Some have said that Ukraine will occupy several cities near the Russian border and exchange them for Donbass and Crimea in order to create the conditions for ceasefire negotiations to proceed. But that will not be enough to reach an agreement. President Putin will abandon the Russians in Donbass and Crimea. It is clear from Budanov's ideology what kind of treatment awaits the citizens if they are returned to Ukraine. President Putin, as president of Russia, would never approve of that. This is not a game. We are not talking about exchanging pieces for pieces you have.